Breathing in, breathing out, being present. With each exhalation, allow your seat to be well established. As if there were roots bearing down into the earth beneath you. But also allow yourself to expand into the ethers, into the space that surrounds you. Do not be confined by the body. Allow yourself to be so much more than that, so much bigger than that, so much vaster. Know the body to be sacred, but know yourself to be more than the body. And then drawing the hands together in front of the heart. We'll lift our voices in one Om, followed by the invocation mantras. If you know them, please join. Taking a breath in. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upama Shravastamam Jesta Rajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashrinvanuti Bisidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahataf Parvatada Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagmam Novacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdeviyai Namaha. Releasing the hands down, fluttering the eyes open. Hello. Good to see you all today. So good to see you.
Thank you.
It's been a minute.
It's been a little minute.
Girija's been busy in college, traveling the world, doing a lot of very, very important things, so it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. It's always good to expand our education, you know. Wouldn't it be nice if we were born into perfection? Like we already knew who we were, we already, like everything was resolved. And we were just born into stillness. What was that?
Wise. Born wise.
Born wise. But then why be born at all? Mm-hmm. If we were born wise, why be born at all? What would be the point of birth then? The point of birth is not to arrive awakened. Unless, of course, that's your job in this life. Which there are very few people through time who they did. They arrived already awoke, awoke and awakened to themselves. Already remembrance of the unity and the truth. But they arrived with a particular purpose to support everybody else who was born not awakened, not in remembrance of themselves. For us, that's the purpose of this life. The purpose of this life is the imperfection of it. The purpose of this life is the difficulty and the ease of it, the combination, the diversity, all of the opposites and all of the struggle along the way to come into some kind of balance, some kind of remembrance, to have little epiphanies and then a lot of forgetfulness, followed by little epiphanies and a lot of forgetfulness. And that seems to be the path in this life, but that is the path. The path is every single moment, every minute, every hour, every day, every year, from the moment that you're born until the moment that you perish, that the physical body perishes. That's your journey. And that's the purpose of this life, is to be in the midst of all of that change and to still do your work. So sometimes, and I mentioned it in class earlier, I hear students say, or they might even say to me, oh, I can't wait to get on my path. It's like, you are on your path, huh? This is your path. Your path is nowhere but here, nowhere but right now. There's no pilgrimage to Machu Picchu or to India or to anywhere else that's going to put you on your path. If you go there, it's because it's part of your path, but it's not the beginning of your path. It may do something for your awareness. It may support you in recalling something about yourself. But if that recollection comes from a place of thinking that, wow, because I hiked to the top of Machu Picchu, while I was there, I found myself, then that's questionable. Everything in life needs to be done in the right mindset. And the mindset is, if we go on pilgrimage, we go because it's part of our path. But there was a whole life that came before, and there's a whole life that's going to come after. And the top of Machu Picchu will be a couple of hours out of all that time. Reading the Bhagavad Gita and having epiphanies is going to be a couple of hours. That's about how long it takes to read the book. Out of a lifetime. Getting into a perfect handstand, a couple of moments out of an entire lifetime. And if that's the only focus that we have, is to achieve that one thing, and then we will finally be happy. We will finally be peaceful. We will finally know ourselves. Then we're fooling ourselves, because none of it's going to make us happy. The only thing that will bring happiness to us is when we remember that this entire life is our path, and we have the ability in every single second of this entire life to make the choices necessary to come into remembrance of the self. Not the little s egotistical self, but the capital S self, the big self, the innermost and outermost self, the self that's unified with all other beings everywhere. That's what this life is for. So you get education. You get education so that you understand more. Sometimes people are really down on education, and I don't understand that. I really don't. I was part of a tradition for a while called Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism. And I loved that tradition. I thought it was so powerful, because Nichiren Daishonin's teaching, they taught the Lotus Sutra, but Nichiren's words were, enlightenment is not possible without education. You need education. You need to understand things in order for enlightenment, for awakening to blossom within you. You cannot be 100% completely ignorant and then get awakened all of a sudden, without some kind of grace from God and a miracle, Shiva coming down and, doing that like he did to the beggar. But the beggar wasn't ignorant, was he? The beggar was the only one who knew. So for those who don't know that story, there's a beggar outside of a temple, and he doesn't know how to read. He doesn't know how to write. The only thing he knows how to do is recite the alphabet. He doesn't even know many of the mantras of his own tradition, because nobody ever taught him. All he knows is a little bit from sitting outside of the temple and hearing all of the lofty people who get all dressed up in their nines and go into the temple and do all of their prayers and make all of their offerings, and they come out and he hears them. So he knows a little bit, but he's not confident in it. So what he knows is how to speak the alphabet, the Sanskrit version of ABC. So Shiva Ratri comes, and Shiva Ratri is the holiday of Shiva. It's when people stay up all night, and for 12 to 24 hours, they just chant Shiva, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Shiva Shiva Shambho, all the beautiful Shiva mantras. We do it here too, so if you're interested, it'll be in March. But he's a homeless person, so he's a beggar in the street, so he can't go into the temple because they won't allow him to come in. That's a whole nother conversation. It's very wrong, by the way. It's very, very wrong. Temple doors should be open to everybody, no matter what. So, but he can't go into the temple. So he sits outside, and he's listening to them, and his heart is just so full of love for Shiva. He's just swaying back and forth, and he's thinking to himself with most of his brain, oh my God, this is just so beautiful. I just adore Shiva. I'm just going to sit here and listen and praise him in my own way. And he starts chanting, the little part of his brain is like, I don't know those mantras, but I do know one thing. I know the alphabet. So I'm just going to chant the alphabet. So he starts chanting the Sanskrit alphabet. A, I, U, R. He starts chanting the whole thing. And he's doing it with such vibrance that Shiva comes down. And he awakens him. And the moment that happens, there's a huge ruckus because people see Shiva there. And they see him with this beggar. And they see that he's given him the gift of self-knowledge. The gift of enlightenment. And all of a sudden, the people start coming out of the temple. And this one man walks up to Shiva and says, you didn't come in. You didn't come to us. You went to him. He's a beggar. He has nothing. He doesn't even know your mantras. But we're in there and we're chanting and we're making offerings and you don't even come visit us. But you bring him enlightenment? What's up with that? And the man's really angry and agitated. And Shiva, cool as cucumber, He just looks at him and he says, yeah, you did go in the temple in your nice, beautiful outfits, which are very nice, by the way. And you brought your very expensive offerings. And you told each other how expensive your offerings were. And you took great pride in those offerings. And you put them on the altar with great pride. In the meantime, here's this man that every time you walk by, you basically spit on him. You look down at him. And yet here he sits, willing to give me everything he has and the only thing he knows. And he lifts his voice up with no pride, with no expectation of a visit, thinking that he would never even be able to be enlightened, because that's what the society has taught him. And yet he's the one of you who deserves it. So it's a beautiful, beautiful story. And what it tells us is, don't live pridefully. Don't live in such a way that we think everything else is better. Don't look over to the wealthy. Don't look over to the powerful. Don't look to the beautiful. Don't look to the fashionable. Don't look to anything else. Look to yourself. Know that you are enough. As you are, you have everything that you need in this life to follow the path that you are meant to follow. You truly, truly do. And some parts of that path are going to be amazing. They're going to be so powerful. They're going to be transformative. You're going to be so excited about it and be just like in love and want to tell everybody, oh my gosh, this is my path. And some parts of that path are going to suck. They're going to be horrible, painful. They're going to be things that you don't ever want to experience. They're going to be challenges. They're going to be beyond your imagination. But they're still part of your path. They're still. Parts of your path are going to be mundane, boring. Obviously, brushing my teeth can't be part of my path. I'm just doing it so they stay healthy. Obviously, taking a shower can't be part of my path. I'm just doing it so I don't smell. Obviously, eating a meal can't be part of my path. And yet those things are such important parts of your path. Absolutely. Brushing your teeth, taking a shower, making a meal, everything. Sitting quietly for a moment, opening a door to walk into a building. It's all opening a door to walk out of a building. How you enter and how you leave matter, because they're all part of your path. Every action that you take accumulates karma. Karma is action, the energy of action. So the way you enter a space, the way you leave a space, accumulates karma. The way you exist within a space accumulates karma. And all karma must be reconciled eventually. So enter the space knowing that entering that space is part of your path. Exit a space knowing that exiting that space is part of your path. And be in that space knowing that being in that space is part of your path. There's no difference. There really isn't. The only reason why we think there's a difference between our spiritual path and the rest of our life is because the ego says so. The ego tries to talk you into believing it. The ego says, oh, this isn't exciting enough. You know? It tries to talk you into going and buying the latest and greatest, going and seeing the latest and greatest, going and doing the latest and greatest, because what's right here, right now, just ain't good enough. Not good enough. And even if it was just a moment ago exactly what you wanted in this moment, now that you got it, it's not good enough. There's something else that's even better. So it takes you outside of yourself. The ego makes you believe that you will finally be on your spiritual path when you get to India, when you climb up to Machu Picchu, when you get the right tarot card, when you have the proper crystal, when you have the right house, the right car, the right family, when things are in the right condition. And then when you get to that place and it's not what you expected it to be, then the ego will make the excuse and say, well, it's your fault. It's your fault. You missed a step along the way, or you're not quite there yet. There's something else waiting for you. So you got to go there. It'll lead you on a wild goose chase. So instead of constantly looking out, looking forward into the future to some event, some special iconic moment that's going to bring it all into place for us, be here now and let this be the place. Wherever this moment finds you, let that be the place. And every single moment that came before this moment, know that every single footstep, every single breath, every single action, every single non-action, even though there really isn't such a thing, but everything has led you here. So that is your path. The pain you've suffered, the joy you've encountered, the compassion you've shared, the apathy that you've had, all of it has been all on your path. A big question for us to ask ourselves is, am I aligned with my path? Or do I keep forgetting about it? You know, am I aligned with my path, or do I keep forgetting about it? And when we forget about it, that's when we find that we make decisions that are painful to us in their outcome, or painful to others, violent to ourselves or to others. When we're not aligned with our path, that's when we tend to be aligned with the ego, because it really is kind of one or the other. You know, you're either aligned with your spiritual inquiry in this life, or you're aligned with your egoic wants, avoidances, desires, all of that. There's nothing else. There's nothing else. Even the quality of the happiness that we seek is either of a spiritual tone or of an egoic tone. And if an individual is seeking happiness with themselves first and foremost, that's egoic. But if an individual is seeking happiness not only for themselves, but for the sake of all beings, that's the spiritual, that's the higher level happiness. If a person is seeking money in this life so that they can buy everything that they want, and they're not worried about how they get the money or who it affects, or, you know, and they have no intention of being generous at all, that's not their priority, that's the ego. Absolutely 100%. But if a person becomes concerned about receiving money in order to to support those who need support, and in order to also support their own family and their own self, and their heart is in a place of generosity, then that's more aligned with the spiritual. So it's really a question of how aligned we are with our path, not where our path is. Our path is right here, right now. There's no way you can't be on it. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so what does that do to life? What does that do to the way we approach life? If you know now, and you all shook your head, every single person shook their head, yes, that makes absolute sense. So now that you know without a doubt, and you have agreed to it, you signed on the dotted line, yes, I accept this whole entire life, every single second is my spiritual path. What does that change for you? What does it change about your perception, your worldview, the way you deal with things, the way you treat people, the way you treat yourself, the way you enter a room, the way you exit a room, and the way you occupy space? What does it do? How does it change you? It will change you. Because we can logically say, yes, I agree with this. But that answer has to move down to the heart. The yes answer needs to come from the heart, because that's where the change will come from. The true, sincere change will come from there. When we say, yeah, this whole life really is my path. And so that means that whether I'm getting kissed by a butterfly or stung by a bee, it's all sacred. Whether I'm in absolute peak health or I'm struggling with illness, it's all sacred. Whether I'm living in an ashram or in a university, it's all sacred. There's no difference. None. So where in your life, whether you're sitting in a temple, a church, or sitting at your desk at work, it's all sacred. So where in your life does that change now? Where in your life does this knowledge that it's the entire life is the spiritual path, the entire life is sacred? The only question is, am I aligned with my spiritual self or with my ego self? What in your life changes now because you've accepted that? Where will you stop yourself and say, you know what? That statement, that thought, that question, not accurate. I need to shift my words, shift my attitude, because this moment is valuable to me spiritually. Maybe when you're having an argument with somebody. Maybe when you're in a frustrating moment. Maybe when an obstacle has arisen. Then you look and say, well, hi, path. So, obstacles, huh? We have Ganesha, right? Ganesha, the remover of obstacles. But he's not just the remover of obstacles. And I always giggle because people make such a big deal out of that. And, I mean, he's known as that. But that's not all he does. He's a prankster. You know, he's the leader of the Ganas. And the Ganas, because one of his names is Ganapati. Pati is like leader or father of, he's not their father biologically or anything, but he's like their leader or the head of the Ganas. And the Ganas are a group of warriors who are known for their mischievous nature. And so they're always like pranksters. And Ganesha is their leader. So he may be able to support you in eliminating certain obstacles in life. He brings to you the wisdom necessary to know how to work through what needs to be worked through. But he also sometimes puts them there. He's like, so you think you're awakened. Okay, what you going to do with that? And this is when those obstacles arise on our life path that we look at and go, that's going to ruin my spiritual path. That's not my spiritual path. My spiritual path is unicorns and sparkles and rainbows. That is not unicorns, sparkles, and rainbows. But it is your spiritual path. Absolutely 100%. And so Ganesha sits there and he giggles a little bit and he says, don't worry, you'll get it. You'll get it. And you do. And I do. And we all do. For a moment. Because we're really forgetful. I always say nature is perfect. She is so perfect. Nature is absolute perfection except one thing. She made us entirely too forgetful about the things that matter. We remember, like, what is it? The memory of what kind of animal? Of an elephant, right? Elephants, they never forget. We have the memory of an elephant when someone does something insulting to us with our grudges. And those things don't really even matter most of the time. But when it comes to the thing that does matter, we are so fast to forget. So fast. It's a split second and it's gone. It's like, epiphany, boom. Shiny thing. What's over there now? And then that understanding goes away. So Ganesha puts another obstacle. Or says, that's not the obstacle you need now because you had that epiphany. Now you need a bigger one. Puts a different obstacle. Because we need constant reminders about how to align ourselves. We need constant reminders that we need to be, that we should be, that on our spiritual path it is about alignment. But what is it alignment with? What is it alignment with? And this all of this other stuff is difficult, but this might be the hardest part. What are we supposed to be aligning ourselves with if we're working to align ourselves spiritually? And the answer to that is the yamas and the niyamas, the 10 ethics. Nonviolence, non-stealing, truthfulness, economy of energy, non-grasping, cleanliness, contentment, discipline, self-study, and devotion. Those are the 10. And we need to be aligning ourselves with those 10 principal qualities all the time, without exception. And that is the difficult part. Because we have so many exceptions. We have, our contract, in our egotistical opinion, our contract is like this long, and the little microscopic printing is like 3,700 pages. And those are all the exceptions that we try to put in place. Well, I will treat you nonviolently as long as you treat me that way. And that's probably the biggest exception. I will treat you kindly. I will treat you generously. I will treat you. I will not hurt you. I will not steal from you. I will be honest with you as long as you're that with me. And that's the biggest exception that we make. And it's probably the most difficult one to overcome. Because in our humanness, we have a sense of entitlement. Every single human being feels they are entitled to something. Maybe it's respect. Maybe it's power. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's status. Maybe it's popularity. Maybe it's attention. Whatever it is, every single human being feels entitled to something. I gave you a birthday present. You should have said thank you. You should have bought me one on mine. We all think we're entitled. And that entitlement steals from us every single time the ability to be aligned spiritually. So we need to work on that sense of entitlement. We're not entitled to anything. Ooh, I don't like that. How about you? We're not even entitled to safety. Do you know that? We're not entitled to anything. We're not entitled to safety. We're not entitled to anything. We're not entitled to a paycheck at the end of the week. Nope. We're not entitled to that. We're not entitled to the loyalty of a friend. We're not entitled to that. We're not entitled to anything. We're not entitled to our partner being monogamous and trustworthy. We're not entitled to that. Those are all contracts that we have entered into. We enter into a job and we say, if I work 40 hours a week, then you will pay me 40 hours. And they say, yes, if I hire you, you work 40 hours and you work appropriately, I will pay you. We enter into a relationship and we say, if I enter into this relationship with you, then there has to be trustworthiness, there has to be loyalty, monogamy. And the other person says, yes, I agree to that. Those are contracts. Those are not entitlements, because if it was a true entitlement, it couldn't be taken away. But you can be fired from a job and your relationship can end. So they're not entitlements. Does that make sense? Yeah. It changes life. Yeah, Julie.
What about the right to be?
The right to be. That's the only entitlement that you have. But what does it mean? And then there goes now, both sides of the brain just went battle. Because the one side says, well, the right to be, is to just be. And it doesn't matter what everybody else or everything else in the world is doing. The right to be is to simply exist. I'm here. I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. I have this body, I'm embodied for whatever period of time I'm embodied. That is, and I have the ability to be present if I choose to. So that's my entitlement. Yeah?
Isn't that more of a reality than a right, though? Doesn't right kind of intrinsically hold some sort of like grasping, like if I view it as my right, that my kind of comes before right in such a way that negates.
You can say that, absolutely. But then we're looking at it and saying there's two types of rights, aren't there? There's a God-given right, and then there's a human-given right. And so the God-given right is just your existence.
But if it's God-given, it's not.
It can also be
yours,
God-taken.
right?
Yeah,
Right.
I know, language is so limited, right?
I know.
It's true. But yeah, I mean, so if we say we're entitled to that, then we are also setting up an expectation. We just have to understand what we mean by the words we use, you know. And so if we're saying that our own existence, our own, you know, right to be, but there can be no conditions on that. And so that's the point I'm trying to get to, is there can be no conditions. So if we go around and say, you can't say that to me because I have the right to be me, well, you're wrong. People can say to you whatever they want to say to you. That's their right. Right? That's their, they can say and do whatever they want to do. And you can say and do whatever you want to do. And if you want to be most highly aligned with your spiritual path, then you say and do peace, stillness, quietude, compassion, the yamas and the niyamas, nonviolence, etc., and so on. But if that entitlement to just be is based on the conditioning of others, what they're doing, how they're acting, you're never going to know it. You're never going to just be. Because you're depending upon outside forces that are just too chaotic, too unpredictable, and yet highly predictable, but unpredictable. So we have to look at what you mean by that word, Julie, what that phrase, you know. We have to ask ourselves, what do I mean by that? Does that mean I get to dress the way I want and nobody criticize me? Does that mean I get to choose my gender pronoun and nobody can criticize me? No, that's not what it means. You can choose those things, it's fine. But other people will do what they're going to do. And what they do, my Guruji would say, MYOB, mind your own business. Because what other people choose to do it has nothing to do with you, really. Even if they say it's directed at you, it really isn't. Whatever anybody reacts toward is only a mirror image of the instability within their own self. A hateful person will hate. A violent person will be violent. An insecure person will feed on other people's insecurities and try to create insecurities. Because likes like. A peaceful person will prompt peace. A friendly person will prompt friendliness. A kind person will prompt kindness. Because like is attracted to like. So if I sat here and I started yelling at you all and started saying mean things, you would start saying mean things, right? Don't you think? Maybe in retaliation or when you left. One or the other, right? But it would prompt you to say similar. But if I sit here and I talk with you about spirituality and about peace and about unity and wholeness, then it prompts that within you. So your best teachers, your most valuable teacher, oh, Lord, how do I say that? Because You can get some really powerful teachers who teach you from another perspective, can't you? Yeah. So true. If peace is what you want to know, then go to the teachers who are peaceful. Do not go to the teachers who are critical and presumptuous and demanding and all those other types of things, because those teachers are out there. Don't go to, if you want peace, don't go to those teachers. If you want peace, go to a peaceful teacher. Yes?
You mentioned peaceful person or violent person. Are there such things?
No.
Right?
In its entirety, no, there's not.
So
Because you are a peaceful person.
But I have the propensity for violence as well.
Correct.
Okay. Just one.
Yeah. And that makes things all the more fun, doesn't it? That makes things all the more fun because we're like, the human species should be the basis of a psychological study on multiple personality syndrome, because we all have it. We all have this peaceful self, whatever that name is, What do you name your peaceful self? Is it Noel or is it something else? Like when you think of the name Noel, do you think of your peaceful self? Or do you think of some other aspect of yourself? You don't have to answer, it's okay. It depends. Yeah, it depends. So then we have these different qualities that we bring forth in our personality, and sometimes we're the peaceful self looking for peace, and sometimes we're the dramatic self looking for drama. Sometimes we're the violent self looking for violence. Sometimes we're the hysterical self looking for hysterical self looking for hysteria. Yeah. That didn't want to come out. Sometimes we're the calm self looking for calmness. And therein lies a big challenge. Because how do we move along in this life embracing more and more and more the peaceful self and reducing the violent self, the hysterical self, the dramatic self, all those other selves that really, lead us toward a greater suffering? How do we do that? And that's why there's techniques within yoga, and there's paths within yoga to follow. Now these are kind of like sub-paths of the main path, because you're on your path, right? And it isn't as complicated. It's like it should be a chart, right? It should be a flow chart. So you've got this path, and you're always on the same path, but within that path, there's little pathways, And so you come to a point in your life and you say, well, I really want to embrace my peaceful self, but I don't know what that means. So you're trotting along on your path, and your path has one little part of it that includes yoga. And it could be Raja Yoga, it could be Karma Yoga, it could be Bhakti Yoga, it could be Jnana Yoga. It could be all of them. It could be meditation, it could be education by way of studying the scriptures and studying the self. It could be selfless service, or it could be some devotion like chanting, right? Or it could be all of them. And so your path continues. And that becomes integrated into your path for some period of time, hopefully for the rest of it. But for most people, for a period of time. Because most people will come to yoga, some aspect of yoga, when they're not feeling well, when things are difficult in life, when they're uncomfortable. And then the moment things get good, for a large number of people, it'll be the first thing that goes. Because they feel like they don't need it anymore. They've got the answer now. They're good. But the problem with that is when you fall off of that wagon, it's really hard to get back on again. When you fall off any wagon, it's hard to get back on. So we need to navigate all those different aspects of the self. And in the yoga tradition, we say all of those masks aren't really who you are. When you're walking the path in this life, what you're effectively working toward is removing those masks, I'm a dramatic person, I'm an angry person, I'm a violent person, I'm a jealous person, da-da-da-da-da. You're effectively resolving all of those masks so that your view opens up, and what you end up knowing is yourself. Yourself. The essence of yourself, which is nothing other than peace. So, are you a violent person and a peaceful person? Yeah, in this embodiment, sure, you're a lot of different people. That's the stories. That's the role that you've told yourself that you're filling. But is that who you really are? And the answer to that is no. You are not in the heart of yourself a violent person. It's a role you're playing in this life. It's a skill you either have or lack. Right? You either have or lack certain skills in a given moment, and that's how you react to that. Either violently or jealously or enviously or generously, etc., and so on. But those are only parts of the role or the roles that you play. Once those things are resolved, then you see into the truth of yourself, and the truth of yourself is only one thing. Just one thing. And I can call it peace, I can call it consciousness, I can call it unity, you can call it one of those things, whatever one you're most comfortable with. But it's really beyond our comprehension, in all honesty. And the teachings even say that. They say, the human mind, which is very much tied into the ego and this limited perspective of self and others and the world, it's not even really possible for us to completely understand the self, the capital S self. It's not really possible for us to understand it. Because if you understand something, you're objectifying it. And if you're objectifying a thing, then it's separate from you. And yourself is not separate from you. Therefore, you cannot understand it. Oh, isn't that aggravating? Did that make sense? Yeah? What questions or reflections? Yeah, Kirita.
I believe this is where the concept of, it all being the way is so foundational and so beautifully supportive, because if we look at all of this human experience and all of the fluctuations as, if it's all the way, then the fluctuations can't actually be the real thing, right? And so when we wrestle with that, and it's quite, for me, it was quite a wrestling. It can be quite wrestling. We begin to align with the breath in such a way that we begin to watch the fluctuations as happening, and they're real, and we feel it, right? We're having this very human experience, but we begin to align with the reality underneath. And you can't do that if even one little sliver of it, you're like, well, that's not the way. Because as soon as that's not the way, then these things are. And then you cling there, and you're always in the shallows.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. It's like, we walk through our life and we have all of these things that come up. And we say, we either like it or we don't like it. We either embrace it or we avoid it like crazy. There's no way that there can be peace there. We think it's too tumultuous, too chaotic. And so these things are keeping me from my path. But look at a surfer. Does anybody in here surf? Surfer's all about the waves, right? The surfer is all about the waves. And what is the surfer maintaining while they're surfing? Balance. Peace, alignment, integration, sense of presence, right? It's symbolic, of course, but it's definitely like it's so natural to them to ride the wave, and it's also natural for them for the wave to crash and for them to get tumbled, taken underwater, hit their head with their surfboard, whatever it happens to be. It's all natural to them. So they don't look at it and go, oh, darn it, They're just like, get back on the board, man. Get back on the board. And so when we're going through life, we can have a similar kind of an attitude. We can say, you know, like, we're surfing the waves of life. Now, do we have the skills to be a surfer? And if your answer is, no, not really, maybe a little bit, but I need more, then go to yoga. Meditate, learn chanting, learn life skills, learn the yamas and the niyamas. Those are really the only life skills that you need, but learn them. Because the yamas and the niyamas are your conflict resolution. They are your way to interact in relationship. They are your way to speak to others. They are, you know, guides for everything. So learn them and practice them diligently. Yeah. And then ride the waves. And it's not always graceful. You know, sometimes we get this picture of, well, when I'm in my spiritual self, I'm going to be, you know, floating around in this beautiful light. And it's going to be really nice. And people are going to look and they're going to say, oh my God, she's so awakened. And it's like, no, you know, when you see a person who's awakened, they're not all like, you know, well put together. As a matter of fact, most of the time, they know they're a little disheveled and they're fine with it. It doesn't matter. They're not worried about appearances. Only the outsiders are, you know. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because once you start to align with your spiritual path, once you start to align with the principles of yoga, once you start to align with the principles of Sanatana Dharma, you stop worrying about those kind of things. You're like, I don't really care if you know, my clothes match. That's what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. Who's that helping? It's not helping anybody, you know? Yeah. You know, when I first went to India, I was smaller than you. When I first went to India, I was like a size 4. And, you know, I was very bendy flexy. I put my foot behind my head, no problem. Go over to India, go to my Guruji's ashram. Now I'm 6 foot tall. Go to my Guruji's ashram. And it's my first time in India, and I'm going there, and I'm going to do one of his programs. And so they take us all out to get us our garments. And we have to wear a certain kind of garment when we're practicing yoga. And so they bring us down, and they're like pajamas. You know, they're the kurtas and the salwar kameez. And so I go and I pick one off of the shelf that I really liked. And I picked it off of the shelf in the size that I would usually wear. And so the teaching assistant came over. Her name is Sangeeta. And she said, oh, that's very pretty, but no, not the right size. And I said, oh, yeah, it is. She goes, no, not the right size. She picks one off of the counter for me that was a 2X. And she says, this is the right size. And I looked at her and I said, that's going to fall off of me. She goes, no, it won't. And I was like, yes, it is. You know? So she gives me this, and I swear to God, I'm thinking this thing is going to fall off of me. When I put it on, I realized why. Like, my ego was so shattered in that moment, you know? But then I realized why. And it was because your clothes need to be roomy enough to move in yoga. They shouldn't be dragging on the floor. They shouldn't be so tight that they're going up your butt. You know, none of that kind of stuff. They shouldn't be cut down to here with the belly hanging out. None of that stuff. You should be modest, all in white, and they should be sizable so that you can move in them, around in the postures and whatnot. So she and I ended up having a really great conversation about that, because she actually approached me and she said, look, I know that there was disappointment. And I said, oh, yeah, there was, but I'm good now. And she goes, well, why is it? She said, how much did we pay for that? And I don't know, it was probably $3 at the time or something, you know. And in India, that's actually a lot. But it was very, very small amount of money, ridiculously small. And she said, why do people in the United States wear things that cut off their circulation? She goes, and why do they pay so much money for yoga clothes? This is what they need. And I said, it's the culture, you know, it's the culture. It's what it is. Lululemons, 110 bucks a pop when they first came out. Crazy stuff. Yeah. So the clothing doesn't matter, as long as you're dressed appropriately. The hygiene matters, right? Hygiene matters. Why does hygiene matter? Hygiene matters because it helps you from becoming sick, like with germ-related illnesses. So you keep your body clean. Does it make sense? I know I'm throwing so much at you today. I'm like, man, we're just all over the place, aren't we? But to bring it back around to the beginning statement, every moment of your life is your path. Yeah.
I was thinking, I really like the story of the beggar so much because I think it's just such a beautiful example. I don't think example is the right word. Embodiment of an individual who is extremely and beautifully submissive to the karmic accumulation, right? He's a beggar.
Yeah.
And, there's only so much that you can do there. But the way that, I don't even think it's an exertion of agency. I think it's just the alignment of his agency with his submission, right? He could have sat anywhere.
Yeah.
And he sat right outside that temple, right? Like, he could have sat anywhere, and he sat right there. And
He could have sat in his own complaints.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He sat right there, and so just a beautiful embodiment of submission to that which we cannot change, right? There's karmic energies are real.
Yeah.
And also, where can we exert to align our circumstances within that path, right, in such a way that we invite the likelihood of Shiva. Right?
Yeah.
It's really lovely.
There's a similar story. There's a man, a monk, and he's going to visit Shiva up at Mount Kailash. And as he's walking, he walks through this town and he walks past a temple. And somebody sees him walking past and runs out and says, "Oh, good man. I hear you're going up to see Shiva." And he goes, "Oh, yes, I'm going to have a visit." And he goes, "Oh, could you ask him a question for me?" He goes, "Yeah, absolutely. What would you like me to ask him?" And he's a very finely dressed individual, very proper individual. He goes, "Could you let him know that I'm the caretaker of the temple? And I'm just curious, how many more lifetimes do you think I need before I reach enlightenment?" And he goes, "Oh, certainly, of course I'll ask him. Absolutely." So he goes on, he walks a little further, and he comes across a businessman. And this businessman who has a family and everything, and he sees him walking past, and he runs out to him, and he goes, "Oh, good sir. I hear you're going up to meet Shiva." And he goes, "Oh, yes. Yeah, I should be there in a few days, I think." And he goes, "Oh, could you do me a favor? Would you ask him, how many more lifetimes does he think I need before enlightenment?" And he goes, "Oh, yes, absolutely. I will absolutely ask him for you. I'll stop on my way back with the answer." He continues walking. He comes across a beggar. And the beggar sees him and runs up to him and goes, good sir. I see that you're heading up to Shiva. Would you do me the kind favor? I humbly ask this. I don't even know. But would you ask him, like, is it possible? Is it possible? How many more lifetimes would I need in order to acquire enlightenment? I mean, is it even possible? So he's thinking to himself, the monk, "Oh, it's not possible." But he's on the outside, he said, "Oh, absolutely," because we don't say things that hurt. Like, we don't look at people and go, "It's not possible." We say, "I'll ask him, absolutely, and I'll let you know what he says." So he continues on. He goes up, he talks to Shiva, comes back on his way back down. First one who sees him is the temple. And the temple guy comes out, and he goes, What did he say? How many more lifetimes before I'm awakened and I don't have to have this cycle of birth, life, and death anymore? And he goes, "Well, he said for you it's probably between 17 and 20 more lifetimes." And he goes, "Oh. That's really disappointing. Here I am, working my butt off, taking care of this temple, making sure the offerings are in order, making sure everybody is taking care of protocol when they're here, and, that's but, yeah, 17 to 20, huh? Guess that's appreciation for you, huh?" He goes off to the next guy. the business person, and he goes, "Oh, what did he say? What did he say?" So the monk tells him, "Well, he said that you're going to have to live between maybe 50 to 75 more lifetimes." And he goes, "Well, wow, here I am living an ethical life. I'm like, I don't hurt anybody. I'm a pretty decent businessman. I mean, there was that one time that, I found that money and didn't give it back, but even though I knew who it belonged to. But still, most of the time I'm pretty honest. Most of the time, I treat my wife and my kids pretty well, Well, I mean, I do rap my kids every once in a while if they talk back to me, because who are they to talk to me that way? I mean, I'm a businessman after all." And so the monk stops him and goes, "Okay." He said, that was his answer. "Have a good day, sir." He goes on, he comes up to the beggar, and he looks at the beggar, and he didn't even ask Shiva for the beggar, because he didn't think it was possible. So he kind of didn't want to talk to the beggar, but he made up an answer in his mind. And the beggar came running up to him and said, so what did he say? What did he say? And he said, "Well, he said, look at that tree. Big, big tree." He goes, "The number of leaves on that tree, however many leaves there are, that's how many more lifetimes." And the beggar looked at him, stood up really tall, and went, "Holy Shiva, are you telling me I can be enlightened? I could actually achieve enlightenment?" And he started to dance. And he was so happy. He started to dance and he was crying. And all of a sudden, Shiva showed up. And Shiva enlightened him on the spot. And the temple man came, and the businessman came, and said, "Whoa, what is this all about?" And Shiva stopped him and said, "You've only had 17 more lives. And yet the entitlement of you to think that because you take care of a temple, that you're entitled to more? And you make excuses for your violence. You say, well, I hit my kids when they talk back to me because I'm due respect. Where's your humility? Where's your humbleness? This man, he's told an infinite number of lifetimes, and he's just overjoyed by the idea of being able to reach enlightenment sometime in the future. Undefined. Humility. And Shiva disappeared. And they all went back about their ways. But you see, right? So we can't feel too entitled about anything. And really, we don't feel entitled at all. And we need to not talk ourselves into excuses about the qualities of our own behaviors and the justifications that we put forward for those behaviors. We need to see things for what they actually are. And we need to cultivate humility within ourselves to know the difference between when it's the ego that's prompting us and when it's actually our spiritual heart. Oh, let me do a time check. That was a lot, wasn't it? And just 1 minute late. Any questions or reflections before we end for today? Mary Ann, you got an introduction, didn't you?
I did. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely, love. Absolutely. Let's sit tall and close the eyes. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om and the All Beings mantra. Taking a breath in. Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you all so much for being here today. So wonderful to gather in your light in your radiance, in your goodness. Be well established on your path. Be aligned with the heart. Tell the ego, take a walk, or at least just bring it into alignment. Let it be healthy. The ego will work in your favor if you allow it to, but it will work against you most of the time. And by you, I mean the innermost you. Because, the innermost you just wants peace. And the ego says, there ain't no drama there. There's nothing for me to do. So when I first began meditating, I would sit down and, of course, monkey mind, which is still there. Monkey mind is always there. You're never going to get rid of it. But you learn how to deal with it. You learn how to see it, how to perceive it. So when I was first learning about meditation, I would sit there and my mind would be like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then I would say to my ego, will you just be a good teacher? Could you be the most powerful teacher that I've ever had and teach me how to be silent? And I immediately went into a place of stillness in my meditation that I had never had before. Because that's all the ego wants is importance. All it wants is to matter. And so you can talk to it in ways that importance makes a difference on your spiritual path, not in your material path. Yeah? So tell your ego, teach me how to be silent. Teach me how to be still. Teach me how to be generous. Teach me how to do all the good things. And then the ego's like, oh, I'll be your teacher. Then you have to watch out that's not lying to you, but that's another story. All right, everybody. Have a lovely